Well, hello, my dear friends. Justyn Smith here, and I want to thank you for joining us. Today, we are looking at 1 Samuel 23. And as we look at 1 Samuel 23 and study this chapter together, we are taking this title, A Friend to Strengthen You. A Friend to Strengthen You. And what we notice as we move through 1 Samuel and David's particular situation, over and over again, it is stated that he had a friend. And the friend or friends in his life were huge in ministering to him and helping him through what he was going through. And so today we're going to look at that, a friend to strengthen you. But before we do, again, my name is Justyn Smith with a Heart for Revival Ministries. You can find out more about us by visiting us online at aheartforrevival.com. If you're listening to this video, you already have some touch in some way, somehow, of our ministry, and we appreciate that. But you can always find out more about us. Maybe you have a church that you attend. Please pass on our information to your pastor. We don't make it a big deal to cold call pastors on the phone because we understand that a lot of times pastors are going to have who they know, who they understand are trustworthy for our type of position coming into a church. And so sometimes the word of mouth is the best way to see meetings come about in our situation. But we also appreciate people who pray for us. Recently, had somebody reach out who keeps up with us. They pray for us, and they reached out and said, hey, how are the meetings coming in? I've been praying for that. And I was able to reach out to him back and say, well, the Lord, since our last newsletter, has given us 7 different meeting opportunities coming up, and there's more coming. And so that was a blessing to be able to pass on to him, but it was a blessing to us to know that he had been praying that God would fill our schedule. And that's just one of those out there that pray for our schedule. And we appreciate all those who do, and I invite you to do so as well. You are a friend, or you are our friends, and we're very thankful. Therefore, this title today means a lot to us, A Friend to Strengthen You. We have been strengthened over and over again by people. Maybe it's been financially, maybe it's been emotionally, maybe it's just been with friendships. I mean, people are great sometimes, but people are still sinful, and people still make bad choices, and we face the effects of that, and sometimes it's a mental battle that we have. But God's created friendship and God's created fellowship to be so powerful and so awesome. Sometimes we miss out on what God is wanting to do through other people by saying, I want to be alone in this life. Friends, man, don't be alone. You don't have to be alone. Just put yourself, well, I'm vulnerable. If I put myself out there, I've been hurt by so many people. Sometimes we bring that on ourselves. And other times it just happens, okay, like David with Saul. But yet, we can rise above it and still have friends in this life. Be a friend that strengthens and be strengthened by friends. Notice this, point 1, sometimes the one who seeks the Lord needs to be strengthened. Okay, this is somebody who is dedicated to God, somebody who prays to God, but Lord, right now I just don't know how I'm going to get through it. Sometimes that person needs to be strengthened by a friend in this life. Notice verse number 1, then they told David, saying, behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors. Therefore David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and smite these Philistines? And the Lord said unto David, go and smite the Philistines and save Keilah. And David's men said unto him, behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines? Then David inquired of the Lord yet again, and the Lord answered him and said, arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thine hand. And so what we understand and what we're just trying to recognize is that David was somebody who would seek the Lord. And seek the Lord again, even in the midst of his running from King Saul in this life. And what a testimony that is of being somebody who would seek the Lord. And we wouldn't expect anything different from David, as David is a man after God's own heart, and God is continuing to form and fashion him to be the next king of Israel. But sometimes the one who seeks the Lord needs to be strengthened by others. Notice point number 2, sometimes a great victor needs to be strengthened, okay? Look at the verse number 5. So David and his men went to Keilah and fought with the Philistines, and they brought away their cattle and smote them with a great slaughter. So David saved the inhabitants of Keilah. So here's David. First of all, he is somebody that seeking the Lord. Now he's somebody who is a great victor, and he's already been a great victor. I mean, basically, when we think of David, the first thing we think of is his mighty triumph over the giant Goliath, but yet he's triumphant again. Then notice point number 3, sometimes a man who has had increased following needs to be strengthened. Sometimes a man who has an increased following needs to be strengthened. He's a victor. He prays. He's had an increased following. Notice verse 13. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah and went whithersoever, they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbade to go forth. So as we consider David, we remember in a previous chapter that 400 men came to David. These were broken men, the gathering of the broken. We talked about it in the last chapter. They were distressed, they were indebted, they were discontent, this 400 men band that came to David. But now, in this particular verse, as I look back at it, which were about 600, David and his men, which were about 600. Okay, so David's increased following has happened. So again, we mentioned, to whom much is given, much shall be required, okay? You want popularity. Understand with popularity, there are problems that arise that you wouldn't have if you didn't have popularity. And that's why sometimes in the workforce, on a general understanding and level, some of you can relate with this, you get the position of supervisor and you realize, I wish I never would have gotten this position, okay? This is not what I thought it was going to be. The pay is better, but I want to go back. And some people are like that. Sometimes people aren't cut out to be leaders. Sometimes God's working in people to become the next leader. Sometimes they commit to it, sometimes they don't. And here is David. He's a man who's seeking God, but yet he still needs to be strengthened. He's a great victor, but he still needs to be strengthened. He is somebody who has a great following and an increased following, but he still needs to be strengthened. And listen, you see that person on social media who is a preacher and who is a popular preacher. Okay, I'm not putting myself into that category one iota because I don't have very many people who follow me. Okay, I might have more than somebody else, but I look at these other ones who are even the same stripe and it's like, oh man, what would it be like to have all of that? Then you realize, okay, wait a second. To whom much is given, much shall be required. And just imagine the stresses. And that means what I'm trying to say is you need to make it a point to pray for that person even more. You need to make it a point to say, hey, what are your needs right now? Because that person, okay, and I could start naming names, they need your prayers. They need your support. With all that popularity, sometimes others who could be used to strengthen those people, like a Jonathan, okay? You can be a Jonathan to them. They don't need my prayers. Look at their popularity. Look at their following. They don't need my prayers. I mean, look how God answered them. Prayers for them. They don't need my prayers. I mean, look at where God's brought them to. Look at the size of their church. Look at, oh, wow, that evangelist just was given a motorhome. They don't need my support. They don't need my, that's not true, okay? Just because they know the Lord and walk with Him, and just because they're great victors in this life, and just because they have an increased following doesn't mean they don't need you. They do need you. They need you to step up your game. They need you to be the Jonathan that they've never had. They need you to let them know you are with them. And it means a lot to them. Now, depending on what type of moment they're going through or season of life they are going through, it'll be handled differently. I mean, some moments are going to be like, thank you so much. I needed that right now. And you're like, you did? But look at your following. But yeah, it's just so lonely sometimes. It is. And you just need to be reminded that being a Jonathan is 1 in a million. Okay, being a Jonathan in this situation that we're going to see is like 1 in 600. Okay, I mean, that's still a big deal. But look at all those people that are following you. Yeah, but you still need a Jonathan in this life. Notice number 4, sometimes a person constantly on the run in life needs to be strengthened. Now, that point makes more sense to us. The one that's seeking the Lord, the one that's a great victor, the one that has an increased following, that doesn't make sense to us. Why do they need a good friend? But this one, the one who's on the run, yeah, I understand that. Verse 14, David abode in the wilderness in strongholds and remained in the mountain in the wilderness of Ziph, and Saul sought him, notice these words, every day. but God delivered him not into his hand. And that last phrase, man, we could preach on that and preach on that. Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand. And maybe every day you're feeling something. Maybe every day it's this fear. Maybe every day you're on the run, but you need to recognize more than a friend, God is there. You need to recognize that God is your hope and God is your strength, and what a wonderful thing that is. Which leads us to point 5. Sometimes it's the very ones who have been delivered that still need to be strengthened. And David delivered again and again, as we saw in verse 14 right here at the end. God delivered him David not into Saul's hand. Okay, God's deliverance was on him. And then verse 15, David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a wood. And so he's on the run. He's been delivered again, day after day, but he still needs to be strengthened. And ultimately, it leads to point number 6. Maybe we're not the ones who need to be strengthened right now, but we have the opportunity to strengthen others. Okay, so all of this that we have dealt with in the past 10 minutes, okay, it's dealing with a particular character, David, who's on the run. Okay, but yet God's delivering him. He's on the run. He is a mighty warrior and a great victor, but he still needs to be strengthened. He's been delivered time and time again. He is a great victor. What were some of the other points? He has an increased following, and he is somebody that prays to the Lord and seeks the Lord, but yet he still needs to be strengthened, which leads to the verse. I mean, this is the verse I want you to get in this broadcast today. Verse 16. Jonathan, Saul's son, arose, went to David into the wood, and strengthened his hand in God. Boom. That is big right there. That is necessary for us to understand. Saul was facing David again and trying to find him. Saul would face David like, I am envious, I am angry, and I'm going to pursue you over pursuing my enemies. What kind of coward is that? Okay, David's only done good for you. David is facing Saul. I am a threat to Saul. He's going to kill me. I've got to keep running. Why do I have to live life in fear every day? But I pray to God. But this is so fearful right now, but God's given victory. I just don't know how to get through this day, but God's delivered me. God's given me a following. But yet in the midst of all of that, David, he needed a Jonathan. Now notice, David doesn't ask for a Jonathan. Nope. Sometimes we're not the one who needs to be strengthened, but we're the one who needs to go strengthen somebody. And right now, I just know that David's going through a hard time, so I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to David. It doesn't matter where David is at. I'm going to go to where he is. That Jonathan friendship is the type of friend that I want to be to somebody else. Whew. How many times as a pastor were things like that, where somebody lost somebody, and I knew that I needed to go to them whether they asked for it or not. So I just show up. Hey, I'm here. I know I'm nobody. I know I'm your pastor. I understand that, and this might be expected. But more than that, I want you to know I'm your friend. Now, we can't always go and be with, but it means a lot when we take the opportunity, and we can, and we make it purposeful, and we are a Jonathan type of friend to somebody else who needs a Jonathan type of friend. You can be that to somebody. You just have to purpose that you are going to be a friend to strengthen a friend who is going through a difficult time. God can use you in a wonderful way. Why don't you let God use you to be that kind of friend? A Jonathan type of friend, a Jonathan, that highlight kind of friend, that friend that just stands out in somebody's mind because they were there for me, even with everything good that was going on, and yet everything that was hard, I still needed somebody like Jonathan. What a blessing to have friends like Jonathan in your life. Be that kind of friend to somebody else as others attempt to be that kind of friend to you. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast. Take an opportunity to like it and to share it and to spread the word. We would certainly appreciate that very much. Until next time, God bless you.